The sun hung heavy in the sky, the kind of Georgia heat that wraps around you like a thick blanket the second you step outside. Cicadas buzzed in the trees and the air smelled like chlorine, cut grass and sunscreen. At the Oak Ridge Community Pool, a modest rectangle of turquoise water tucked between rows of tidy brick homes, kids shrieked with laughter. Parents lounged in folding chairs, and the lifeguard perched on his tall white chair kept a lazy but watchful eye on the splashing chaos below. Near the shallow end, a woman sat on the edge of the pool, her feet dangling in the cool water. She wore a simple navy blue one-piece swimsuit and a wide straw hat that shaded her face. Her skin was the rich brown of roasted coffee beans, and though she looked relaxed, there was a quiet strength in the way she held herself. Shoulders back, chin level, eyes soft but alert. Beside her, a little girl with two neat braids and a bright yellow floaty around her waist paddled happily, making big splashes and giggling every time a droplet hit her nose. The woman watched her daughter with a smile that reached her eyes. This was their Saturday ritual, just the two of them, a few hours of peace away from hospital hallways, beeping machines, and the weight of other people's worries. She worked long hours often through the night, but she never missed this. Not if she could help it. Today, she'd even brought her tote bag with her, not because she planned to work, but because it held her favorite children's books, the ones she read to her daughter every night before bed. She'd skim a page or two while the girl played, just to stay connected to that quiet rhythm of home. Neighbors waved as they passed. Mrs. Henderson from 3 doors down called out, "Enjoying the sun, dear?" And she nodded with a warm "Yes, ma'am." The lifeguard, a college kid named Tyler who'd known her since he was in elementary school, gave her a thumbs up when she asked if the water temperature was okay for her daughter. Everyone here knew her, not just as a face in the neighborhood, but as someone who showed up for school fundraisers, for the community garden, for the free health clinic on Saturdays where she'd spend her only day off checking kids' ears and listening to their hearts with that silver stethoscope she always carried. She wasn't flashy. She didn't need to be. Her presence was steady like an old oak tree, reliable, calm, rooted. Her daughter trusted her completely, which was why, when the girl got tired, she waded over without hesitation, water dripping from her arms, and tugged gently on her mother's hand. "Mommy, can we get ice cream after?" "Only if you finish your apple slices first," the woman teased, reaching into her bag for the small container she'd packed that morning. She pulled out a water bottle, too, taking a long sip before offering it to her daughter. The bag sat open beside her on the lounge chair, a canvas tote with a faded logo from a medical conference. Inside, a paperback book, a tube of reef-safe sunscreen, a hair tie, a notebook with scribbled reminders, call pharmacy, refill for Miss Jenkins, and coiled neatly at the bottom, her stethoscope. It wasn't unusual for her to bring it. Sometimes she'd absent-mindedly twist the tubing around her fingers when she was thinking, the cool metal bell a familiar comfort. A few yards away, 2 boys raced each other in the deep end, their shouts echoing off the concrete. A toddler wobbled on unsteady legs near the steps, her mother close behind. The scene was ordinary, peaceful, the kind of summer moment people remember years later with a quiet fondness. No one was causing trouble. No one looked out of place. It was just a neighborhood pool on a hot Saturday, full of the usual mix of families, laughter, and the gentle rhythm of everyday life. But not everyone saw it that way. 2 blocks over, a woman named Linda Carter had been watering her roses when she noticed a car she didn't recognize parked near the pool entrance. She squinted. Then she saw a black woman sitting by the pool with a child. Linda didn't know her, hadn't seen her at the neighborhood meetings, and though she'd lived in Oak Ridge for 15 years, she'd never once questioned why nearly everyone at the pool looked like her. White, middle-aged, comfortable. So when she saw someone who didn't fit that picture, her mind jumped to conclusions. She didn't see a mother. She didn't see a doctor who'd saved dozens of local children from ear infections and asthma attacks. She saw someone who doesn't belong. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed 911. "Hi, yes, I think there's a suspicious person at the community pool," she said, voice low. "She's just sitting there. But she looks, I don't know, out of place. Maybe watching the kids too closely." She didn't mention the child with her, didn't say the woman was smiling or reading a book, just suspicious. And in that word, loaded with fear and assumption, the call was logged and 2 patrol units were dispatched. The woman by the pool had no idea. She was wiping sunscreen onto her daughter's nose, humming a little tune under her breath. The same one she used to soothe crying patients in the hospital. Her daughter made a silly face and she laughed, the sound light and genuine. She felt safe here. She'd lived in this neighborhood for 6 years. Her daughter had taken her first swim lessons in this very pool. She knew the rules: no running, no glass shower before entering. She followed them, respected them. She belonged. The first sign something was wrong came not with sirens, but with silence. The lifeguard sat up straighter. A few parents turned their heads. Then she heard it, the low rumble of a police cruiser pulling into the parking lot. Her stomach tightened, but she told herself it was probably nothing. Maybe a lost dog, or a noise complaint from the tennis courts. She kept her eyes on her daughter, who was now trying to balance on the pool ledge like a gymnast. Then she saw them. 2 officers in full uniform walked toward the pool area with purpose. Their hands rested near their belts. Their expressions were tight, alert. They weren't smiling. They weren't relaxed, and they were heading straight for her, her breath caught. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as they approached, their boots clicking against the wet concrete. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head and a thick jaw, stopped a few feet away. His partner, younger, with close-cropped hair and restless eyes, stood slightly behind him, scanning the area like they expected an ambush. "Ma'am," the first officer said, voice flat. "Stand up. Show us your hands," she blinked. "I'm sorry, what's this about?" "Just do as I say," he snapped, his hand hovering near his holster. "Hands where I can see them." Her daughter froze, eyes wide with fear. "Mommy?" "It's okay, baby," she said softly, though her own heart was hammering. Slowly, carefully, she rose to her feet, keeping her palms open and raised. "I'm just here with my daughter. We come here every Saturday." The younger officer stepped forward, eyes darting to her tote bag, then back to her face. "We got a call about a suspicious person. You fit the description." "What description?" she asked, voice calm but firm. "I live 3 streets over. My name is—" "Don't move," the older officer cut in, and this time his hand went to his gun. Not drawing it yet, but the threat was clear. The younger one followed suit. In seconds, both had their weapons half drawn, fingers tense on the grips. Around them, the pool fell silent. Kids stopped splashing. Parents stood up. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The lifeguard climbed down from his chair, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Officers, that's Dr. Ellison. She's been coming here for years. She's fine." But the officers didn't lower their weapons. They didn't look at the lifeguard. Their eyes stayed locked on her as if she might lunge at any second. As if a woman in a swimsuit, barefoot with a child clinging to her leg, could be some kind of threat. She felt the heat of the sun, the cool water still dripping from her ankles, the weight of 100 eyes on her back. But more than that, she felt the old familiar sting, the one that came not from the sun but from being seen as dangerous simply for existing in a space where others felt entitled to comfort. She'd faced it before, in department stores, in parking garages, even once in the hospital cafeteria, when a new intern mistook her for custodial staff. But never like this. Never with guns pointed at her while her daughter cried. She wanted to yell, to demand answers, to ask how they could look at her, a woman who spent her days healing children, and see a criminal. But she didn't, because she knew deep in her bones that raising her voice could make things worse, that any sudden movement might be misread. So she stood perfectly still, hands up, eyes steady, and said the only thing she could, "Please." "My daughter is scared." The officers didn't respond. They just kept their weapons trained on her, breathing hard as if they were the ones in danger. And in that terrible, suspended moment, the cheerful sounds of summer vanished, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like drowning. But then, something shifted. Her tote bag, left open on the lounge chair, tipped slightly as a breeze rolled across the pool deck. It wasn't much, just a gentle nudge, but enough for the contents to spill out onto the concrete. Sunscreen rolled toward the edge. A book flopped open. And then, catching the sunlight like a signal flare, her stethoscope tumbled out, the silver bell clinking softly against the ground. The older officer's eyes flicked down, his brow furrowed. He blinked once. Then again. "What is that?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. She saw the change in his face, the confusion, the dawning realization, and she knew in that instant that the truth was about to catch up with them. But for now, all she could do was stand there, hands in the air, heartbreaking for her daughter, and wait. The moment the stethoscope hit the concrete, everything seemed to slow down. The silver bell caught the sunlight and glinted like a tiny mirror, throwing a sharp flash across the officer's face. He flinched, not from fear but from surprise. His eyes narrowed, then widened slightly as he took in the rest of what had spilled from the tote bag. Children's books with cartoon animals on the cover, a half-eaten apple in a plastic container, a water bottle with a cartoon dolphin on the side, and a small notebook filled with neat handwriting. His partner, the younger officer, hadn't noticed it yet. He was still locked onto the woman, his weapon held steady, his jaw clenched tight, sweat beaded on his forehead, mixing with the tension rolling off him in waves. "Don't move," he repeated, voice rougher this time, like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. But the older officer, his name was Dan, though no one had said it out loud, lowered his gun just an inch. Not all the way, not yet, but enough that the barrel wasn't pointing directly at her chest anymore. He glanced at the lifeguard, who was now standing just a few feet away, hands still raised. "Is that her stethoscope?" Dan asked, voice quieter now, almost uncertain. The lifeguard nodded fast. "Yeah, she's a doctor. Works at Grady Children's. She volunteers at the Saturday clinic, too. Everyone knows her." A woman in a floral swimsuit stepped forward from the crowd of onlookers. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into a bun. "I'm a retired nurse," she said firmly. "I've seen her at the clinic. That's definitely her stethoscope. She's not a threat. She's a healer." Dan swallowed hard. His eyes flicked back to the woman standing with her hands up, her daughter still clinging to her leg, tears streaming silently down the little girl's cheeks. He saw it now, the calm in her posture, the way she kept her voice low to soothe her child, the lack of panic or aggression. This wasn't someone hiding something. This was someone who'd been enjoying a normal Saturday, just like everyone else. But his partner, Kyle, hadn't processed it yet. He was still wound tight, still seeing shadows where there were none. "We got a call," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Said she was acting strange. Watching the kids. No one called about me," the woman said gently, still keeping her hands visible. "I've been here for 2 hours. I haven't spoken to anyone except my daughter and the lifeguard. I didn't even go in the water, I was just sitting here reading." She didn't sound angry, not yet. There was hurt in her voice, yes, and exhaustion. The kind that comes from having to explain your humanity over and over again. But mostly she sounded tired. Tired of being treated like a suspect in her own neighborhood. Tired of having to prove she belonged. Kyle finally looked down at the spilled bag. His eyes landed on the stethoscope, and something in his expression shifted. Not all at once, but like a door creaking open after years of rust. He blinked. Lowered his weapon slowly, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to. "Ma'am," he started, then stopped. Swallowed, tried again. "Are you a doctor?" She nodded. "Pediatric oncology. But I also do general checkups at the community clinic. That's why I have my stethoscope with me. Sometimes I review patient notes during my downtime." Dan finally holstered his gun, not with a snap or a flourish, but with a slow, deliberate motion, like he was ashamed to have drawn it in the first place. He ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking much older than he had a minute ago. I'm sorry," he said, the words coming out rough like they'd been stuck in his throat. "We got a call." "We didn't know." "You didn't ask," she said softly. "You didn't talk to the lifeguard. You didn't look around. You just saw me and assumed the worst." He had no answer for that, because she was right. Around them, the crowd began to relax, but the tension didn't vanish. Parents pulled their kids closer. Some shot angry glances at the officers. Others looked at the woman with sympathy, but also with a kind of helpless guilt, like they'd witnessed something wrong and hadn't known how to stop it. The little girl finally let go of her mother's leg and wrapped her arms around her waist, burying her face in the damp fabric of her swimsuit. The woman bent down slowly, careful not to make any sudden moves, and hugged her tight. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "You're safe. Mommy's here." Dan took a step back, giving them space. He looked at Kyle, who was now staring at the ground, his face flushed with shame. "We need to call this in," Dan said quietly. "Tell dispatch it was a false alarm." Kyle nodded, but he didn't move right away. Instead, he looked at the woman again. Really looked at her. Not as a threat, not as a stereotype, but as a person, a mother, a professional, a neighbor. And in that moment, something inside him cracked open. "I'm really sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean, I thought." "You thought I didn't belong here," she finished for him. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. He nodded, unable to meet her eyes. She stood back up, still holding her daughter's hand. "This happens more than you think," she said. "Not always with guns. Sometimes it's just a stare, a question. A security guard following me in a store. But it adds up. It wears you down." Dan cleared his throat. "Is there anything we can do? A report? An apology letter to the neighborhood association?" She almost laughed, bitter, short. "What I want is to never have to explain why I'm not a criminal while my child is crying. But since that's not something you can fix with a letter, maybe just remember this. Next time you get a call like this, ask questions first. Look around. Talk to people. Don't just see a black woman and assume she's dangerous." He nodded slowly. "I will." A man in the crowd pulled out his phone. Not to film aggressively, but to capture the moment. Not the confrontation, but the aftermath. The officers standing there, visibly shaken. The woman comforting her daughter. The spilled bag on the ground. The stethoscope still gleaming in the sun. He didn't say anything, just hit record knowing this needed to be seen. Within minutes, someone else shared it on a local community group. Then a neighborhood mom posted it on her Instagram story. By the time the officers walked back to their cruiser, without making an arrest, without issuing a warning, just leaving quietly, the video had already been viewed hundreds of times, but the woman didn't care about the video. She didn't care about going viral. All she cared about was getting her daughter home, giving her a warm bath, reading her favorite book, and holding her until the fear in her eyes faded. She gathered her things slowly, carefully folding the towel, zipping the tote bag back up. The stethoscope went in last. She didn't hide it. She didn't feel ashamed of it. If anything, she held it a little tighter, like a reminder of who she really was, not what they'd assumed. As they walked toward the parking lot, hand in hand, a few neighbors came up to her. Not to gawk, but to offer quiet support. "That was awful," one woman said. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Another handed her a bottle of water. "For your daughter," she said gently. She thanked them, but her mind was already somewhere else. Not on the officers, not on the call that started it all, but on the bigger picture. How many times had this happened to others? How many times had it ended worse? She thought about the names she'd seen on the news, people who didn't get to walk away, who didn't get a second chance because someone assumed the worst before asking a single question. Her daughter squeezed her hand. "Mommy, are the police bad?" She knelt down, brushing a wet curl from her daughter's forehead. "No, baby. Not all of them. Some are trying to do the right thing, but they make mistakes. And sometimes, those mistakes hurt people who don't deserve it. Like us."
"Like us," she admitted softly.
"But we're strong. And we're going to keep being kind even when it's hard, okay?" The little girl nodded, trusting her completely. Back at the pool, the lifeguard picked up the stethoscope from where it had fallen and placed it gently on the lounge chair. He didn't touch anything else. Just left it there like a symbol. A few kids whispered about it. One little boy asked his mom, why did they think she had a gun? His mom didn't have a good answer. By evening, the story had spread beyond the neighborhood. Local news picked it up. The police department released a short statement. Officers responded to a call regarding suspicious activity. Upon arrival, they determined there was no threat. The department is reviewing the incident, but the woman didn't wait for reviews or statements. She sat on her porch that night, her daughter asleep inside, the stethoscope resting on the table beside her iced tea. She thought about calling it quits, moving somewhere quieter, somewhere safer. But then she remembered the kids at the clinic who lit up when they saw her, the parents who hugged her in the grocery store because she'd helped their child breathe easier. She wasn't going anywhere, because if she left, who would stand in that space? Who would show her daughter and every other child that you can be both gentle and strong, both kind and unbreakable? The sun had set, but the heat still lingered in the air. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car drove by with its windows down, music playing softly. Life went on. But something had shifted, not just for her, but for everyone who'd witnessed it. And though the fear hadn't completely left her, neither had her resolve. She picked up the stethoscope, cool and familiar in her hands, and smiled faintly. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she'd be at the clinic listening, healing, and proving once again. That presence is its own kind of power. The next morning came quiet and still, the kind of Sunday where even the birds seemed to move slower. Dew clung to the grass and the air smelled like wet earth and coffee. Inside the small brick house 3 streets from the pool, the woman sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a soft robe, staring at her untouched mug. Her daughter was still asleep, curled up with her stuffed dolphin, her breathing slow and peaceful. No nightmares, at least not yet. That was a small mercy. She hadn't slept much herself. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. The flash of metal, the cold weight of fear in her chest, the way her daughter's small fingers had dug into her leg like she was trying to disappear into her. She replayed the officers' faces, the confusion, the shame, the dawning horror as they realized what they'd done. It wasn't just anger that kept her awake. It was the exhaustion of having to carry this weight again and again, while the world moved on like nothing happened. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from a colleague at the hospital. Saw the video. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer right away. What could she say? "I'm fine" felt like a lie. "I'm not okay" felt too heavy for a text. So she set the phone face down and took a slow sip of coffee, even though it had gone cold. By mid-morning, the video had spread further than she expected. Not just local news. Now it was on regional channels, shared in parenting groups, medical forums, even a few national social justice pages. People were calling it the stethoscope moment. Some praised her calm. Others demanded the officers be fired. A few commenters predictably said things like, "They were just doing their job," or "Why was she at that pool anyway?" She didn't read those. She knew better than to feed the noise. But what surprised her most wasn't the outrage, it was the quiet messages. A retired teacher wrote, "I taught in this district for 30 years. I've seen black families treated like outsiders in their own neighborhoods. Thank you for standing your ground." A young med student messaged, "You're why I want to be a doctor. Not just to heal bodies, but to show people like me that we belong in white coats too." Even the lifeguard sent a note. "I'm sorry I didn't step in faster. I'll do better." She read those over and over, letting them settle in her chest like warm stones. Around noon, her daughter woke up. She padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, are we going to the park today?" She knelt down and hugged her tight. "Not today, baby. But how about we bake cookies instead?" The girl's face lit up. "With chocolate chips?" "With extra chocolate chips." As they mixed flour and sugar in a big bowl, the woman tried to be present, to focus on the smell of vanilla, the sound of her daughter's giggle when she spilled sprinkles on the floor, the simple joy of making something sweet together. But her mind kept drifting back to the pool, to the way the officers had looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, not a person to be seen. Later that afternoon, while her daughter napped, she got a call from someone she didn't expect, the police chief. He didn't leave a message. He called directly, voice measured but sincere. "I want to apologize personally," he said. "What happened yesterday shouldn't have. Those officers acted on assumption, not evidence. That's not how we train, and it's not who we are." She listened quietly. She appreciated the call, really she did. But she also knew apologies didn't change systems. They didn't erase trauma. Still, she gave him credit for reaching out. "I'm glad you called," she said. "But I'd rather see action than words." He paused. "We're launching an internal review, and I'd like to invite you to speak with our training division. Help us understand where we're failing." She thought about it. Part of her wanted to say no, to shut the door, protect her peace, and never look back. But another part, the part that had stayed in medicine even when it broke her heart, whispered, "What if this is a chance to change something?" "I'll think about it," she said. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, she took a walk around the block. She needed air, needed to feel the ground beneath her feet without flinching. A few neighbors waved. One woman stopped her to say, "My son saw what happened. He asked me why the police thought you were dangerous. I told him the truth because of the color of your skin. And then I told him that's wrong, and that people like you are why our community is strong." The woman thanked her, throat tight. When she got home, she found an envelope taped to her front door. "No return address. Inside was a handwritten note on plain white paper. I was the one who called the police. I didn't know you. I saw a black woman alone with a child and assumed the worst. I was wrong. I'm ashamed. I've already spoken to the chief and admitted my mistake. I hope you can forgive me, and I promise to do better. No name. Just those words. She stood on the porch for a long time, the paper trembling in her hand. Anger flickered first. How dare they hide behind anonymity after causing so much pain? But then something else rose up, relief. Not because the call was made, but because someone had the courage to admit it. To take responsibility. That was rare, maybe even hopeful. She didn't throw the note away. She tucked it into her journal, next to her daughter's drawings and clinic notes. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Change starts with honesty. The next few days passed in a blur. She went back to work at the hospital, slipping into her white coat like armor. Her patients didn't know about the video. To them, she was just doctor. The one who listened carefully, who explained things in simple words, who always asked how they were really feeling. One little boy with leukemia held up his new superhero shirt and said, "My mom says you're my real-life hero." She blinked back tears and ruffled his hair. But outside the hospital walls, the world kept turning. The police department released a longer statement. The officers had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Mandatory bias training would be expanded, and they'd be reviewing all suspicious person calls to prevent racial profiling. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't justice. But it was movement. Then came the invitation she hadn't expected. A local community center asked if she'd speak at their monthly town hall. Just 10 minutes. Share her story. Not to shame, but to educate. She almost said no. Public speaking wasn't her thing. She preferred quiet rooms and stethoscopes to microphones and crowds. But then she thought of her daughter watching her from the audience one day, proud to say, "That's my mom," so she said yes. The night of the town hall, the room was packed. Not just with neighbors, but with people from nearby towns, reporters. Even a few uniformed officers sitting in the back. She walked to the front slowly, heart pounding, but when she saw her daughter waving from the third row, sitting between the retired nurse and the lifeguard, she felt steady. She didn't read from notes. She just spoke from her heart. "I'm not here to call anyone a racist," she began, voice calm but clear. "I'm here to say that bias lives in all of us, even good people. It shows up in who we trust, who we fear, who we assume belongs. Yesterday, 2 officers saw me and saw a threat. But what they didn't see was a mother who packs apple slices and reads bedtime stories, a doctor who stays late to comfort scared kids, a neighbor who waters Mrs. Langley's plants when she's sick." She paused, looking around the room. "I carry a stethoscope, not a weapon. But sometimes just being me, in this skin, in this body, is treated like an act of defiance." A few people nodded. Some wiped their eyes. "I'm not asking for pity," she continued. "I'm asking for awareness. Ask questions before you assume. Look closer. See the person, not the stereotype. And if you make a mistake, own it. Like someone did with that note on my door. That took courage. And it mattered." When she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause, slow at first, then rising like a wave. Not loud or showy, but deep, respectful. The kind that comes from hearts opening, not just hands clapping. Afterward, people lined up to speak with her. Not for autographs, but for connection. A young officer said, "I've been on the force 2 years. I never thought about how a call like that could go wrong. Thank you for showing me." A high school girl whispered, "I want to be a doctor too. Seeing you up there, it made me believe I can." Driving home that night, her daughter asleep in the back seat, she felt something she hadn't in days. Not peace, exactly, but purpose. The incident hadn't broken her. It had clarified her. She wasn't just a doctor. She was a witness, a bridge, maybe even a catalyst. And as she pulled into the driveway under a sky full of stars, she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't let fear silence her. Because her voice and her stethoscope had work to do. A week after the town hall, the woman got a call from the police department, not the chief this time, but a civilian liaison who worked with community outreach. Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. "We've scheduled a restorative session," she said. "If you're willing. Just you, the 2 officers, and a trained mediator. No cameras, no press, just a chance to talk." The woman didn't answer right away. She'd spent years in hospitals. sitting with families after bad news, holding space for grief and guilt and confusion. She knew real healing wasn't loud. It wasn't performative. It happened in quiet rooms and shaky voices in the space between "I'm sorry" and "I forgive you." But it also required courage. From everyone. "I'll do it," she said finally. But only if they're ready to listen, not to defend themselves, to understand. The meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon in a small conference room at the community center, the same place where she'd spoken just days before. She arrived early, wearing simple slacks and a soft sweater, her stethoscope tucked safely in her bag. She didn't bring it out. This wasn't about proving who she was. It was about seeing who they could become. The officers came in together looking like they hadn't slept. They wore plain clothes, jeans and button-downs, not uniforms. No badges, no weapons. Just two men who looked smaller without the armor of authority. The older one kept his eyes down at first. The younger one fidgeted with his wedding ring, twisting it nervously. A woman named Elena, the mediator, greeted them all with a calm smile. She'd worked in conflict resolution for 20 years, mostly with schools and neighborhoods. "This isn't about blame," she said gently as they sat around a round table. "It's about understanding. You can speak honestly here. You can be human." Silence settled over the room like a thin blanket. Then the older officer cleared his throat. "I've replayed that day 100 times," he said, voice rough. "I saw a call come in, suspicious person, and I just reacted. I didn't ask who she was, didn't look around. I saw a black woman by herself with a kid, and my brain jumped to worst-case scenario. I've been on the job 15 years, and I thought I was fair. But that day, I wasn't." He paused, rubbing his temples. "My daughter's about the same age as yours," he added, glancing at the woman. "If someone pointed a gun at her mom for no reason, I don't know what I'd do." The younger officer finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "I grew up in a town where we never saw black families," he admitted quietly. "Not because they weren't welcome, just they weren't there. So when I joined the force, I told myself I didn't see color. But that's not true. I didn't know how to see people who didn't look like me. And that call, it scared me. We'd just heard about an officer getting shot 2 counties over. I was jumpy. And I let that fear turn you into a threat." He swallowed hard. "I'm so ashamed. Not just because we drew our guns, but because we didn't even see you. You were sitting there calm, with your kid, and we treated you like you were about to hurt someone, when really, you're the one who helps people." The woman listened without interrupting. She didn't nod or shake her head. She just let their words land one by one, like stones dropped into still water. When they finished, she took a slow breath. "I appreciate your honesty," she said. "But I need you to understand something. It's not just about that one day. It's about a lifetime of moments like it, being followed in stores. Having neighbors lock their doors when I walk by. Getting pulled over for expired tags that weren't expired. Each time I have to decide, do I speak up and risk making it worse? Or stay quiet and carry the weight?" She looked at them both. "When you pointed those guns at me, my first thought wasn't I'm going to die. It was, what if my daughter sees me get hurt and thinks the world is against us? That's the real damage. It's not just fear. It's the message it sends to the next generation." The younger officer's shoulders slumped. "I never thought about that," he whispered. "You don't have to," she said gently, "because you've never had to." Elena guided the conversation carefully, making sure it didn't turn into excuses or defensiveness. At one point, the older officer asked, "Is there anything we can do now to make it right?" She thought for a long moment. "Don't just say you'll do better, show it. Next time you get a vague call, slow down. Talk to people on the scene before you act. And if you see a colleague making the same mistake, speak up. Real change happens in those quiet moments, not just in press conferences." They talked for nearly 2 hours. There were tears, hers, his, even the mediator's at one point. Not dramatic sobs, but the quiet kind that come when truth finally finds its way out. By the end, the officers didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't expect it. They just thanked her for showing up. As she walked out into the late afternoon sun, she felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because it had been witnessed. Truly seen. That evening, she sat on her porch again, this time with a warm cup of tea. Her daughter played with chalk on the driveway, drawing a big heart with "Mommy plus me" inside it. The woman smiled. She'd been afraid this incident would leave a scar on her child. But instead, she'd watched her daughter grow more curious, more compassionate. Just that morning, the girl had asked, "Can we invite the new family on Elm Street to the park?" They looked lonely. Hope, it turned out, was a quiet thing. It didn't roar. It whispered. A few days later, the police department announced new protocols. All suspicious person calls would now require officers to gather more details before responding. Description, behavior, specific concerns. Not just doesn't look like they belong. They also launched a pilot program. Monthly community walks, where officers would visit neighborhoods not in uniform. Just to talk, listen, and build trust, and the two officers, they volunteered to help design the department's new anti-bias training, not as instructors, but as students sharing their mistakes. They didn't get special treatment. They were still on leave, still under review. But they showed up, humbly, consistently, ready to learn. The woman agreed to consult on the training too. Not as a victim, but as a partner. She brought in nurses, social workers, even a few teenagers from the local high school. "If you want to understand bias," she told the training team, "listen to the people who live it." One afternoon, while reviewing lesson plans, she had an idea. What if she started something just for girls, especially girls of color, who dreamed of careers in medicine but didn't see themselves reflected in white coats? She'd seen it too many times. Bright, curious kids told they don't look like doctors, or who gave up because they thought they didn't belong. She called it Stethoscope Strong. The first meeting was held in the community center library. 10 girls showed up, ages 8 to 16, some shy, some bold, all curious. She didn't lecture them. She let them hold her stethoscope, listen to their own heartbeats, ask questions about school, about fear, about what it really meant to heal. One girl, maybe 12, with braids and wide eyes, asked, "Did you ever want to quit after what happened at the pool?" The woman didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes," she said. "For a minute I did, but then I remembered why I started. Not for the title, not for the praise, but because every child deserves to be seen, heard, and cared for, no matter what they look like." The girl nodded slowly. "I want to be like you." "You already are," the woman said, smiling. "You just need a stethoscope and the courage to wear it." Word spread. More girls joined. Local doctors donated old stethoscopes. A retired biology teacher offered to tutor. The program grew, not into something grand, but into something real. A safe space, a mirror, a promise. Meanwhile, the video from the pool kept circulating, not as a spectacle, but as a teaching tool. Schools used it in diversity workshops. Police academies showed it during ethics training, always with context, always with care, and the woman, she kept working, kept healing, kept showing up. One Saturday morning, she took her daughter to the pool again, not because she had to prove anything, but because it was still their place. The lifeguard waved. Mrs. Henderson brought them lemonade. Kids splashed and laughed like nothing had changed. But something had. As she sat on the edge, feet in the water, her daughter paddled over. "Mommy," she said, treading water with confidence now, "do you think the officers are okay?" She thought about it. "I think they're trying," she said. "And that's what matters." The sun shone warm on her skin. The water sparkled. And for the first time in a long time, she felt not just safe, but whole. Because healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about turning pain into purpose. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the ordinary magic of a summer day, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, with her daughter, her community, and her stethoscope, ready to listen again and again. Months passed, and the sharp edges of that summer day at the pool began to soften, not because it was forgotten, but because something new had grown around it. The woman still carried the memory like a scar that ached in the rain, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it had become a compass, quietly guiding her toward work that mattered even more. Stethoscope Strong was now meeting every other Saturday. What started with 10 girls had grown to nearly 30. They came from all over the county, some from quiet suburbs, others from neighborhoods where sirens were more common than birdsong. They didn't all want to be doctors. Some dreamed of being nurses, lab techs, mental health counselors, even medical illustrators. But they all shared one thing. They'd been told in big ways or small that they didn't belong in medicine. And now, in this sunlit room with posters of the human heart and shelves of donated books, they were learning that belonging wasn't given. It was claimed. The woman didn't run the program alone. She'd brought in others, black women who were pharmacists, physical therapists, EMTs, so the girls could see themselves reflected in every corner of healthcare. One session, a trauma surgeon showed them how to suture a banana. Another time, a community health worker taught them how to take blood pressure using a borrowed cuff. The girls laughed, asked bold questions, and sometimes sat in stunned silence when someone said, "I almost quit too. But I stayed, for you." Her daughter loved coming along even though she was still too young to join the official group. She'd sit at a small table in the corner, coloring pictures of lungs and bones, proudly telling anyone who'd listen, "My mommy listens to hearts for a living." One afternoon, as they packed up after a session, a teenager named Tasha lingered. She was quiet most days, but today her eyes were bright. "Can I ask you something?" she said, twisting the stethoscope around her neck like a necklace. "Of course," the woman said, folding a stack of handouts. "Do you ever get scared now? Like going places? After what happened?" The woman paused. She thought about the truth, not the polished version, but the real one. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not all the time. But sometimes when I walk into a new place or see a police car behind me, that old fear flickers. But then I remember, I'm not just a body walking through the world. I'm a healer, a teacher, a mom, and those things are stronger than fear." Tasha nodded slowly. "I want to be that strong too." "You already are," the woman said, touching her shoulder gently. "You showed up today. That's strength." Meanwhile, the police department had quietly changed. The new protocols were working. Fewer vague calls, more de-escalation, more conversations before commands. The two officers had returned to duty not with fanfare but with humility. They'd started walking the neighborhood on their days off, not in uniform, just stopping by the park or the corner store to say hello. People were still wary, but less so. Trust, it turned out, wasn't built in grand gestures, but in showing up, again and again. One Saturday, the older officer showed up at the community center, not for a meeting, but to drop off a box. Inside were 20 brand new stethoscopes, donated by a medical supply company after he'd reached out. "Thought the girls might like real ones," he said, not looking her in the eye at first. "And I told my daughter about you. She wants to join Stethoscope Strong next year." The woman was surprised but not shocked. Healing, she was learning, could ripple in every direction. She invited him in, not to talk about the past but about the future. He sat in the back during a session, watching the girls practice listening to each other's heartbeats. When one little girl giggled because her friend's heart sounded like a drum, he smiled, really smiled, for the first time since that day at the pool. Later, he said quietly, "I used to think my job was to control danger. Now I think it's to protect dignity. Yours taught me that." She didn't say thank you. She just nodded. Some things didn't need words. Back at the hospital, things were changing too. Colleagues who'd once stayed silent now spoke up when they heard biased comments in the break room. The administration approved a new mentorship program pairing young staff of color with senior doctors. And when a new intern, a young black woman, walked into orientation, the woman made a point to greet her first. "Welcome," she said, handing her a stethoscope charm for her badge. "You belong here." The intern's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so nervous." "You don't have to be," the woman said. "Not here." At home, life settled into a new rhythm. Her daughter started asking deeper questions, not just, "Why did they do that?" but "What can we do so it doesn't happen again?" Together, they wrote letters to the school board asking for more diverse books in the library. They volunteered at the food pantry. They planted marigolds in the front yard because, as her daughter said, pretty things make people feel welcome. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies blink in the dusk, her daughter asked, "Do you think that day at the pool was bad luck?" The woman thought for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "It was painful, but it wasn't bad luck. Sometimes hard things happen so we can make something better come after." "Like Stethoscope Strong?" "Exactly like that." The girl leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I'm glad you didn't move away." "Me too," the woman whispered. As the months turned into a year, the story from the pool became less of a headline and more of a lesson. It was taught in ethics classes, referenced in town meetings. Even the woman who'd made the original call started volunteering at the community garden, always giving a quiet nod when their paths crossed. No words were exchanged, but none were needed. Some apologies live in actions, not speeches. The woman never sued. She didn't want money. She wanted change, and she was seeing it piece by piece. Not perfect. Not overnight. But real. But one spring morning, she stood in front of a group of new police recruits. Not as a victim, but as a guest speaker. She didn't show them the video. She didn't shame them. She just told them about her daughter's first swim lesson, about the smell of chlorine and sunscreen, about how ordinary that day had been, until it wasn't. Your job isn't just to enforce laws, she said, voice calm but firm. It's to see people, really see them. Because when you assume, you erase. And when you erase someone's humanity, you hurt more than just them. You hurt the whole community. Afterward, a young recruit, a woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile, approached her. My little sister wants to be a doctor, she said. Can I tell her about Stethoscope Strong? Yes, the woman said, smiling. Tell her to come next Saturday. That night, she sat at her kitchen table updating the program's supply list. New notebooks, more stethoscopes, art supplies for anatomy drawings. As she wrote, her daughter came in holding a drawing she'd made at school. It showed two figures by a pool, one tall, one small, under a big yellow sun. Above them, in wobbly letters, it read, My Hero. The woman's throat tightened. She taped the drawing to the fridge right next to a photo of the first Stethoscope Strong group. She knew the world wasn't fixed. Bias still lived in systems and whispers and unexamined hearts. But she also knew this. Change didn't always come with sirens and headlines. Sometimes it came in a quiet room full of girls listening to their own heartbeats. Sometimes it came in an officer buying stethoscopes. Sometimes it came in a child believing her mother was a hero, not because she fought, but because she stayed. And that was enough. Because courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to build something beautiful anyway. So she kept building, one heartbeat at a time.